we held our Public Policy Roundtable with guests Rev Todd Yeary, Senior Vice President of RainbowPUSHCoalition.
My privilege to join you on this, the anniversary of that first March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom on this day in 1963. The truth of the matter is we are living in a version of what I would call political deja vu. The same issues that confronted us then confront us now. The same policy needs that were needed then are needed now. The gains that we thought we would celebrate, and for many of us, we did celebrate in 1964, 1965, 1968 during the War on Poverty and the Great Society Plan of the Lyndon Johnson administration. Those have been, in many ways, under constant attack. And the truth of the matter is, it really isn't about what happened in the 60s. It's what happened in the Brown v. Board of Education decision of 1954. There's been this constant and unrelenting onslaught of trying to undo the notion that separate but equal could not be any kind of a doctrine that affirmed democratic principles, but that somehow or other we needed to go back to the Plessy policy of 1896. And so here we are in 2020, again, presenting another demand. The issue on that day in 1963 was not about a speech. It was about the issues of the day. We have made that March on Washington about a dream, and really it was about a demand. The dream helped to frame the objective, but the demand framed the interaction. And so now we must bear in mind that in 2020, in the age of a pandemic that has a parallel track to it, we've been fighting against COVID-19 for the last several months, but we've been fighting against systemic racism since the earliest days of this country. We must continue to put forth our best effort and present righteous demands. And you cannot make a demand if you don't engage in the process. We must remember the history of what brought us here. We built not only a nation, but an economy on the backs of free labor of those who did not have any legal status. They could not be counted as persons, much less citizens. And now here we are as the descendants of those who paid the ultimate price for generations, being able to stand up on their behalf because they could not stand up on their own. And so we should not only just cry out their names in the streets, we need to speak the names of those who have been martyred across this country as we go to balloting processes, whether they be in person, by mail, early voting, whatever it is. Everybody, lottie-dottie, everybody, the whole family needs to participate, because voting is the way we make a demand for what is our right as persons and citizens. Here's what I would suggest needs to be the broad frame, and we can talk about the specifics. We need to talk about judicial reform. We need to make sure that state and federal courts are not stacked against the interest of human dignity and human rights. That often means, particularly across the country, that we need to have folks in executive seats, governors and the president, who are equipped and ready to name those persons who will not only apply the law, but apply it in a way that is fair and just and does not erode the progress. We need to have an education agenda, a healthcare agenda. We need an access to capital agenda. We need a living wage agenda. We need an opportunity to close the racial wealth gap, because I can pass you my wealth, I cannot give you my job. And so what we have to do is we have to get beyond this issue of who speaks when. There was one program on that day in August of 1963, and there were a number of voices that had to be heard. I would suggest to you on this day in 2020, you and I need to make our voices heard, first by making sure that we are registered to vote and our voter registration is current. And secondly, know the process for how we're going to engage in the election in every different state across the country. Some of these states built their early economies on prison labor, and we now must push back as those who have withstood the test of time and the hostility of governments that go all the way back to the founding of this country, and to declare that we are not going to take it anymore.
Ethrin Cousin, Ambassador to the UN World Food Program.
Our food systems failed during COVID, and we know that there will be significant income invested in the food system. We need to ensure that that money that is invested in the food system is also invested in Black business owners in the food system. And I'm not just talking about the mom and pop restaurants. We need to also invest in businesses that are in manufacturing, logistics, storage, to ensure that as we create a more durable and sustainable food system, that we are not just benefiting as consumers, we're benefiting as business owners and also as those increasing the number who are employed in the community as a result of having more Black business owners.
Dr. Leon McDougall, President of the National Medical Association.
The Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. Now, why is the Affordable Care Act so important? So when you look at the United States and where we live, African Americans mostly live in the southern states. So guess which states don't have Medicaid expansion, don't have Affordable Care Act access. So there's about 12 states in the South. So when there is this scourge of COVID-19 pandemic, now you have a whole community of folks trying to decide, well, I don't have insurance. I'm underinsured. So they're going to be less likely to go to the emergency room. Yes, everybody can get treated. You go to the emergency room, you can get treated. And guess what else they're going to give you on your way out of the emergency room? $2,000 bill, right? So those are the types of things that lead to healthcare disparities. So when we talk about this COVID-19 pandemic, these states, local governments, people living in these states have to hold their legislative officials accountable for that Accountable Care Act.
C.K. Hoffler, President of the National Bar Association.
When we talk about election suppression, we all know this here on this panel, but there are two ways to protect the right to vote if you're a lawyer. So we know that the RNC and the DNC, they dispatch lawyers as poll watchers to protect the right to vote, to ensure the integrity of the process. We know this is a factual matter. The RNC has said they're going to dispatch 50,000 poll workers. That's partisan. The DNC does it, the RNC does it, but there's a nonpartisan effort that the National Bar Association, Transformative Justice Coalition, RainbowPUSHCoalition, Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, ACLU, and other organizations, NAACP, embraced, and that's election protection. On March 2nd of 2020, Reverend Jackson and the late Congressman John Lewis in Congressman Lewis's office in Atlanta gave me my mandate and said, you must, in your year, make sure that Black lawyers protect the right to vote. And that's what we're doing. We have programs, we have a 50-state program that we're not talking about or doing intellectualizing about, that we are acting on in our communities. We've identified 20 of the worst states where election suppression is alive and well. And we, at our upcoming conference in October, are doing simultaneous trainings of all those 20 states so that people can be prepared and armed and know what they should do to fight election suppression. We have lawyers, our young lawyers that are working in Florida, where the citizens of Florida voted to restore the rights of convicted felons once they've served their time. And then the legislature said, yeah, but you can do that, but you're gonna have to pay all your fines. The problem is in Florida, there's no centralized way of finding out what those fines are. So there's a group that the National Bar Association has joined, and thus far they've raised over $5 million to pay all of those fines. They have done the data, they've done the research, and there are many celebrities, LeBron James and others, who are putting up the money for that. It's an extraordinary effort, but Black lawyers, National Bar Association lawyers are working hand in hand because there have to be lawyers to review the documentation to ensure that those persons will have their rights restored. That's just one example of the things that we're doing in the election protection space. So we are ready, we're willing, and we're able, and we're in action. My administration is one of action. I have made a call to action of every single African-American lawyer living in this country. And for those who are above, we're praying. We're praying and we're asking for their grace. Because right now, here and now, we are fighting 3 pandemics, and election suppression is extraordinary. And we don't have a moment to wait. We don't have a moment to talk about it. All we have a moment to do is to act. So I'm going to leave you all with 10 things. And by the way, Barbara Arnwine, who is the mother of the election protection movement, it is a movement. Our Barbara Arnwine. When I say R, because she's a member of the National Bar Association. She's a part of RainbowPUSHCoalition. She has transformative justice. She is the mother of the election protection movement for lawyers. She is our senior advisor and helped to design our policy last year, and it's being executed this year for the National Bar Association. Just want to make sure y'all are aware of that. So when we talk about the 10 pointers, I'm just going to go through them quickly for every single person, and that I have preached to our lawyers that we must do in our communities. They are as follows. 1, check your voting status. How do you do that? Go to vote.org, vote.org. Check your voting status. You may think you're registered to vote, but you may have been purged like the millions of other Americans because you didn't do something or somebody's saying you didn't do. Check your voting status. Number 2, verify the various voting options. And Reverend Wilson, I have this document which I can circulate, and I'm going to suggest that we send out to all of our members, to anyone, and we publicize it because it's critical. There's voting options. Well, we know we're in a pandemic. There's some people who are going to vote in person no matter what. Why? They don't trust the mail. Why? Because the mail's not reliable. Why? Because we're having issues with the Postal Service. We know this. There's litigation. We are not Bobo the Clown. We get it. But we must be able to vote safely. Early voting is critical because that's a safer way over a period of time. So for those who are comfortable, vote at your comfort level, but you must vote. Early voting. On election day, if you're going to vote, you must have protective gear. This is not the time to try to be body beautiful. We must protect ourselves with a mask, with a plastic protective shield, with gloves. We must, if you take the gloves off, use hand sanitizer because you're touching equipment to vote. Be socially distanced. Bring water, bring snacks, because you might be in line for a very long time. And bring your lawn chair. Oh yeah, don't be concerned about optics and how you look. You must vote. And if it means that you have to sit for hours, bring your lawn chair, be hydrated. And the National Bar Association is raising money and has already raised a lot of money and has a movement afoot in these areas, these 20 states that we've identified, and we've broken it down to certain cities as well, where we are going to be part of that movement to provide protective gear to our community, because it is not an option not to vote. Vote by mail if that's your comfort level. We know in our community that's not popular, because when you vote by mail, it's got to be exact. You can't answer 5 out of 10 questions. You must answer all 10 questions. And by the way, in most jurisdictions, you must put a stamp. You can't just drop it. You got to put a stamp. You know how you just think, oh, I'll just drop it because it's a ballot. No, stamp. Just remember that. But every state is different, so you must know what the rules are in your state. The National Bar Association, through its 86 affiliate chapters and sections and divisions, has training in most critical states with election suppression. Have a voting plan. Well, what does that mean? Don't let somebody else tell you how to vote. Think of what you're going to do now. Don't wait till election day, because it might be too late. Because on election day, if you want to check your status, it might very well be too late. You don't want to get a provisional ballot. Have a voting plan now. Go to your state election officials. You can do it online. Find out what's available. If you can get an absentee ballot, then, and if you can drop it off at a drop box, do that if that is what is safest for you. If you want to vote in person, I would encourage early voting. Or if you're going to vote on election day, have all that protective gear and be prepared to wait in line, because we know that the turnout is going to be exceptional and extraordinary, as well as should be, protecting the right to vote. Number 4, reach out to the state election officials to find out the rules. If you have access to the internet, you can do that. If you don't, call the National Bar Association. we will do that. Call Rainbow Push Coalition, and they will tell you how to get to your election officials in your state. Spread the word in your communities about how to protect the right to vote, going to vote.org. Spread the word, be purveyors of information, of truth. Register with the NBA election protection effort if you are a lawyer. www.nationalbar.org. www.nationalbar.org. Reach out to Rainbow Push Coalition. Reverend Jackson has been registering and his organization's people to vote forever, for decades. We have the systems in place. In the National Bar, we have a dedicated space on our webpage as of next week that will be solely dedicated to voting. Protect yourself. I talked about masks. I talked about gloves. I talked about shields. I talked about hand sanitizer. I talked about water, food, snacks, umbrella, and lawn chairs. Yes, perhaps this may not be the best look, but we're talking about voting. We can't be talking about the best look. Voting, protecting the right to vote. Too many people died so that we could be here to vote. And please always social distance. Number 7, register 5 people. 5 people. Just take it upon yourself to be responsible for the registration of 5 people. Reach out and touch someone in your family and your circle and your immediate circle. Number 8, arrange for transportation for someone who wishes to vote in person. Remember COVID. We know in Kentucky when they had shut down 97% of the precincts, and there was litigation around that, but people still voted in the primaries. Uber and Lyft did offer free rides. There are organizations and companies who believe in the right to vote. It's not partisan. They just want people to vote. Reach out to those organizations. Usually many of our grassroots organizations do that. If you got a car, make arrangements, but it must be done safely. Remember, we're in COVID. 9, recruit volunteer poll workers. We know that many of our poll workers historically have been senior citizens. It is not prudent, and they will be counseled against being poll workers during COVID because they're senior citizens and many times have other medical ailments that would preclude them, and their doctors probably wouldn't allow them to do that. But there are other people who want to be poll workers. Recruit them. There are many things that we can do from our desk by making phone calls. And then finally, the last point is refuse to be denied. Refuse to be denied. If you get to your polling station and there's some type of raggediness, funkiness, and we know it when we see it, it's election suppression, call 1-866-OUR-VOTE. It's a hotline. 1-866-OUR-VOTE. Call Rainbow. I've done that. I did that when I was in Brookhaven last year voting for Stacey Abrams, all kinds of irregularities. I waited 5 hours in line this time to vote in the past primary. 5 hours, it should have taken 10 minutes. There was litigation surrounding all of that because sometimes you just got to escalate it up. Again, 1-866-OUR-VOTE, that's a hotline. So all of these pointers I will get to Reverend Jeanette Wilson, but just know we got lawyers ready in the field. We're not talking about it, we're acting. We only got time to talk. And we are also providing protective gear for our citizens, for our community to vote. Because after all, the one thing that lawyers know how to do, they know how to talk and they know how to get into court and to speak truth to power and to seek justice. And that's what the NBA lawyers, that is their mandate, and that's what we're doing.